Special Envoy Hans Gromberg intensifies diplomacy to save Yemen's fragile ceasefire. U.S. President faces increasing criticism for not adopting stern position to end the war in Yemen. International Migration says thousands of Yemenis have been displaced since the beginning of the year. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. Special Envoy Hans Gromberg has intensified diplomatic efforts as to try to save the ending fragile UN truce. In this context, he arrived to Aden and discussed with government officials ways to expand the truce. This report gives more details.
Hans Gromberg, United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, landed again in Yemen's southern port city of Aden on a visit aimed at salvaging a shaky truce between the warring parties in Yemen and to push for open roads in Taiz. Gromberg's visit to Aden comes as a last-ditch attempt to renew the truce and peace efforts. The Yemeni government blamed the Houthis for hundreds of violations of the truce since April 2. Abdullah al-Alimi, Yemen's vice president, said the Houthis' reluctance to lift their siege on Taiz and their continuing attacks on government-controlled areas threatened to torpedo the truce and United Nations efforts to achieve a peace deal to end the war. The Yemeni official said the government is keenly committed to what was agreed upon, and it deals positively, flexibly, and responsibly with any proposal that would alleviate human suffering. The Yemeni government reiterated that the Houthis are not serious about ending the suffering of thousands of besieged people in Taiz, since they haven't nominated their representatives in the joint meeting on opening roads in Taiz and other provinces. The new visit by Hans Gromberg raises a question about the viability of the truce or even the United Nations belated efforts to bring peace in Yemen, while the Houthi party is committing daily violations in all fronts. The rebels are shelling the residential areas, causing civilian death, especially among children. At the end, will Gromberg be able to bring the Houthis to the table of peace again? The time will tell.
The U.S. President Joe Biden is facing increasing criticism for not having adopted a stern position in order to end the war in Yemen. Although he hailed his latest visit to Saudi Arabia, some observers claim that the aim of the visit was to end the rift with Gulf countries and secure more oil supplies, especially with global crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. More is in the following report.
President Joe Biden hailed his visit to Saudi Arabia, pushing back against criticism of his smiling sit-downs with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other autocrats while citing progress toward ending the war in Yemen. Biden described success in securing a Saudi commitment to extending a nearly 4-month UN-mediated truce, a deal that has yielded the longest pause in fighting since the conflict began in 2015. He went to refer to that example as active, principled American leadership in the Middle East.
The United States will not just aim to deter threats of regional stability. We will work to reduce tensions, de-escalate and end conflicts wherever possible. This approach is already reaping dividends. As was mentioned, in Yemen, working closely with Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, and the UN, we forged a truce that is now in its 15th week.
But with that truce set to expire on August 2nd, warring parties appear far apart. Western nations' leverage over Iranian-backed Houthi rebels remains slim, and a political solution to the conflict is not on the horizon, intensifying questions about whether the United States-backed peace effort can succeed. Yet, the stakes are really high. While the existing truce has halted most of the airstrikes and other violent acts that have killed thousands of civilians, a surge in global food prices caused by the war in Ukraine has deepened Yemen's slow-building humanitarian catastrophe, thrusting tens of thousands into famine-like conditions. And in Yemen's fragile state, every violation of the truce adds to worries of a sudden, violent collapse. Houthi shelling in Taiz, a flashpoint city, raised such fears. The shelling killed at least one boy and injured 11 other children, most under the age of 10. Pictures of wounded children and their bloodied sandals circulated on the internet, causing outrage and prompting a stern condemnation from the United Nations Special Envoy, who brokered the truce and is now trying to negotiate an expanded version. Some critics derided the White House attempt in the lead-up to Biden's visit to highlight its effort to end the war as a fig leaf for a visit that was basically aimed at healing a rift with Gulf nations and boosting global oil supplies. While seeking the international community's help to end the war is not a shame by itself, yet Yemen needs to learn not to have high expectations in that regard and should work on it by themselves if they want to see a real breakthrough.
The Iranian-backed Houthi militia continues its violations of the truce on the western coast fronts, using various heavy and medium weapons and drones. The military media of the joint forces reported that the monitoring units documented more than 94 new Houthi violations on the western coast during the past 48 hours.
اسمي سليمان عزيز محمد عبد الله الجابر العنبري. كراب الله ومار على الغنم تقربي بعد ما قمت لقيت رجلي مقطوعة. كنت ألعب كباو ورا الغنم بذهم مقداش.
In Hodeidah, a child was killed and another child was injured as a result of artillery shelling launched by the Houthi militia. Yemen Today channel correspondent stated that the Houthi shelling targeted the two children while they were grazing sheep. A child was shot dead by a Houthi sniper in western Taiz governorate. Human rights sources said the child Muqtadir Saeed was shot dead by a Houthi sniper yesterday evening in the village of Al Hawba. They added that the Houthi sniper stationed in a hill overlooking the village shot the child, leading to his immediate death. Also in Taiz, a 14-year-old boy was injured by a Houthi sniper. Sources confirmed that the militia targeted the child yesterday evening while he was going to perform prayers at a mosque. He was wounded in the right and left legs. Two children were killed in a landmine explosion in Al Bayda Governorate, central Yemen. The Yemeni Landmine Observatory said the two children were killed as a result of a mine explosion while they were grazing in Kirba area in Al Bayda. During the past few days, the number of mine victims among civilians has significantly increased in the various areas, especially in the governorates of Al Bayda, Al Hodeidah, Al Jawf, Taiz, Saada, and Ma'rib. 3 civilians were killed and wounded in a military campaign carried out by the Houthi militia against local residents in the northeast of Al Mahwid Governorate. A tribal source explained that the Houthi militia imposed a stifling siege on the people of one village following a dispute over drilling a water well that a Houthi leader was trying to dig despite the position of the people. The International Organization for Migration announced the displacement of about 43,000 Yemenis since the beginning of this year. It said in a statement that from January 1 to July 16, the organization's displacement matrix tracked 7,134 families, representing 42,804 individuals who were displaced for one time. The IOM pointed out that the most governorates that witnessed displacement are Ma'rib, Taiz, Hodeidah, and Ib. Coming next. Star of the City Festival in Hadramaut gives hopes to people in the time of war. Welcome back. The World Bank agreed to provide additional financing of $150 million for the second phase of the Emergency Human Capital Project in Yemen, which started in 2021. The Minister of Planning and International Cooperation said the project will support access to vital services for healthcare, nutrition, water supply, and sanitation for citizens of the most vulnerable groups. Food insecurity and malnutrition situation in Yemen has deteriorated further in 2022. More than 17 million people are in need of assistance according to World Food Programme. The following report has more on this.
Yemen's extreme food insecurity and malnutrition crisis has worsened in 2022, with 17.4 million people in need of help, rising to 19 million from June until the end of the year. In addition, approximately 2.2 million children under the age of 5, including 538,000 severely malnourished and about 1.3 million pregnant and lactating women, are projected to suffer from acute malnutrition over the course of 2022. Conflict and economic crisis remain the main drivers of acute food insecurity and malnutrition in Yemen, which is further exacerbated by the instability of humanitarian assistance. In addition, access to public services has been brought to a near halt, resulting in cuts of salaries, poor access to health services, inadequate access to water and other services. Yemen has reached the worst food insecurity since 2018. The situation is worsened by high fuel prices and reduction in humanitarian assistance, with 17.4 million Yemenis facing acute food insecurity. After the truce was announced on April 2, the Yemeni rial increased by 34% in regions controlled by the internationally recognized government of Yemen, partly because of the expected deposit of $2 billion to the Central Bank of Yemen in Aden. However, by the end of June 2022, the Yemeni rial had declined by 19% and foreign exchange reserve shortages were still present. In addition, fuel imports through the ports of Al Hudaydah and Salif has significantly increased. The total amount of fuel imported through the northern ports increased by 137% in the second half of 2022 compared to the last year. As reported by WFP, total food imports through Al Hudaydah and Salif during the second half of 2022 increased by 17% compared to the same period in 2021. However, global food crisis reached an all-time high in March 2022 and have remained at similarly high levels since then. Also, global food prices have risen by 23% since June 2021 and are expected to rise further through the end of 2024 as a result of the Ukraine-Russia crisis ripple effect on supply chains. Finally, as a result of the continued funding shortages, WFP reduced its food rations as it targets 5 million people with less than half of their daily requirement, and 8 million people receive close to one-third of their daily requirement.
نعاني من الماء مع الجفاف عندنا ما فيش ماء كيف نقدر نعيش والبلاد حار هكذا نحن نحتاج إلى الماء زيادة
من ما بدينا نعرف أنفسنا احنا دائما نسافر للماء.
طبعا الماء كان المنقول لا يكفي، مثلا ننقل على ظهر الحيوانات 20 لتر 30 لتر ما يغطيش.
قال احنا واصلنا تعب وديما من بعيد نسافر لو سفر نسير بالليل
ليل ونهار وهم ينقلوا الماء وعادوا على طوابير وعلى أبيار من بعد وعادهن ما في بهنش نازفات وأماكن والماء عدو ما هوش صالح حتى للشرب.
طبعا المياه كانت هي ملوثة، انه عبارة سطحية مكشوفة، فكانت الرياح تقلب كثير من طبعا الملوثات داخل الآبار.
في ناس ماتوا بسبب الكوليرا، بسبب حمى الضنك، بسبب يعني شحة المياه ما فيش، والمياه شمات.
قبل أن برمضان في مات كذا واحد بالقرية اللي تحت الحيقاف بسبب فشل كلوي، وكثير من المنطقة عندنا يعانوا من الأمراض الكلى دي بشكل مستمر.
A number of women and children in the city of Qataba in Dola carried out a protest calling for the government to provide water to the city. Children and women raised banners calling for an end to their suffering as they transport water from distant wells because of the high prices.
And assume the running of this project. The people in the villages have no money to pay for the water. They price the water unit at 2,000 riyals. Those cannot afford that price. What shall they do? Shall my neighbor get the water and I shall die?
In El Jaf Governorate, natural disasters have exacerbated displaced people's suffering. The following report gives more details on this.
These children are trying to restore their tent, which got destroyed by the strong winds. The situation of these children is the same as a bitter reality that many families from other districts face.
Our tents were destroyed and none came from the local government or international agencies to help us. So we call on the authorities to support and help the people. We live in tents and even these tents are now destroyed.
The tents are scattered all over the place. The severe winds and rains made the people in Al Jawf suffer and lose their tents, and this has made their life even worse.
This displacement camp has more than 86 families. All these families have lost their tents. There are people from other camps, and the total number of families that lost their tents amounts to 280. Unfortunately, none from the authorities intervened to help us. But there was an initiative from the local authority, and we were able to give people food baskets and 100 tents, and we also gave them some medical supplies.
On the other hand, the executive unit launched an urgent distress call for the humanitarian organizations to intervene and rescue the displaced people of Al Jawf and provide emergency aid that guarantees them life after what they lost from shelter, food, and water. These poor people were already in a dire humanitarian situation as they were displaced from their homes and live in tents. Now they don't even have tents to stay in, and until now there has been no intervention from relief and humanitarian organizations.
The City Star Festival season in Hadramaut is an annual tradition. The people in Hadramaut and the neighboring governorates mark this event, which shows the rich Hadrami heritage. The following report has more. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Special envoy Hans Grunberg intensifies diplomacy to save Yemen's fragile ceasefire. U.S. President faces increasing criticism for not adopting stern position to end the war in Yemen. International migration says thousands of Yemenis have been displaced since the beginning of the year. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.